Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to speak with you today. We'd like to welcome you to I Observe Teaching Assistants, and I have with me today Rob Webster from UCL in London, who's going to be speaking to us this morning. So thanks very much for joining us. Rob, it's lovely to have you here. Thanks very much for making the time to come and speak with some of our I Observe users. So Rob, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you've ended up working in the area of teaching assistants?
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be invited to do this. Yes, sure. So my background, I suppose it started when I was actually working as a teaching assistant in about 2002, 2003,
Right.
and at the same time I was doing my master's, my postgraduate degree in education policy, and two worlds collided really. An interest in the policy that was developing up around the increased use of teaching assistants and other support staff as part of a wider set of reforms to address teacher workload and retention issues. And I guess some of the experiences I was having as a non-teacher in a mainstream primary setting, and some of those kind of observations, I suppose, that I made of the context that I was working and so on. So I made that something of a focus of my postgraduate work, and then as perhaps it was a case of right place, right time, that when I went to look for my first research post, it happened to be on a research project that was looking into exactly the same area. This was the DIS project, which stood for the Deployment and Impact of Support Staff, which to all intents and purposes what I was trying to do in a very modest way in my postgraduate work. And that was at the Institute of Education about 11 years ago, and I've been there ever since on a succession of projects which have been looking at the use and impact of teaching assistants, and also it's coming from the other end of the telescope, the experiences of children who are on the receiving end of that support, who tend to be the children with special educational needs.
Okay, it's really interesting, and having been a TA, Rob, that must make you really credible with teachers and with TAs when you work with them now, I guess. So
I think it helps.
So can you give us a little potted history of the key research on teaching assistants over the last decade that's kind of led us to this point, that's made this webinar a kind of topical and current conversation?
I think there's a fair bit of research on TAs, and there has been over the years, and it's certainly increased in probably the last 4, 5, 6 years. I think that one of the main triggers for that was the findings from the DIS project, which I mentioned just a moment ago, which is the project that we worked on. There are, I mean, just to sort of very, very broadly, there are two areas of research, key areas of research, when we're looking at the impact of TAs on learning. And there is, and it's really characterises the way the main roles that TAs have in schools. So they might be leading intervention programs, catch-up programs, usually outside the classroom. And then the job that I guess most schools will recognise that they see TAs doing most of the time is supporting in classes. And those two areas of research tell different stories. The research on interventions and TAs leading interventions is actually really a very promising area of research, and in fact it's something of a success story really, and perhaps not enough is made of it. The Education Endowment Foundation have funded 7 trials so far on this topic. TAs doing various interventions for phonics and literacy and reading and numeracy, and every single one of them is returning a positive set of findings, which is really quite unheralded in research. So there is a very clear way in which TAs are being used and used well. But the other area of the support in the classroom is where we are seeing, I think, persistent difficulties, and the impact is nowhere near what it could be. It's this is essentially what we were looking at in the DIS project, with that policy background of a lot of additional public money spent on a lot of additional adults in classrooms and in schools, and it kind of pushed it up the agenda. The findings, I mean, put in a nutshell, were that the children who were receiving the most amount of support from TAs were actually doing less well as a result of that support. So it turned on its head the common sense assumption that if you give children who are struggling most more adult time in groups and one-to-one, that they would keep pace with their peers. So the DIS project rather sort of challenged that, and it was that was something of a surprise. We didn't predict that we would find that, but ever since it's been I think riding fairly high on the agenda, because it's that sort of set of research findings at the scale at which we did it, and the consistency and profoundness of the results have meant it's been quite an area of focus, not just for research, but just to sort of just to say a few words about the other side of what I do at the IOE. It's to actually try to do something about it. To try to work with schools and the sector on guidance and tools and all kinds of things that might help schools to remediate some of the common problems.
Interesting. And you're going to tell us a little bit about that in a few minutes' time, which will be great. And it's really interesting there how you've distinguished for us between TAs offering support and intervention and TAs in the classroom. And that research evidence is now becoming much more publicly available. But it's interesting, when you speak to teachers, you will always find teachers who will, in spite of the evidence presented, for instance, by the Education Endowment Fund, will say that they've got TAs who they consider invaluable. So what is it that TAs do when they offer that real value for money in the classroom in particular?
Sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. I worked with a lot of teachers and Senkos and school leaders, and you'll struggle to find any that wouldn't talk about their TAs in terms of we couldn't manage without them. The school wouldn't run well without them. So to offer real value for money, the thing that's driving our kind of thinking and the sort of practical advice and guidance that we've been generating over the last couple of years is to really shift the thinking into fundamental ways, I think. The first would be it's kind of driven by an idea that schools need to use TAs to supplement teaching and what teachers are doing, and not replace them. And I think one of the issues we've had historically is that TAs are being used to perhaps plug gaps or work with the children who are struggling most, perhaps whether teachers aren't less able to do so or less confident in doing so. There's all kinds of very understandable reasons why this happens, but on the screen has just appeared our summary from the Education Endowment Foundation guidance report that we wrote, Making Best Use of TAs, where we've tried to capture some of this. So just to come back to those two important things. The first is around how we need to think about how we use TAs in the classroom. So we're of a view that TAs need to be used to add value to what teachers are doing and not replace them. So that's our supplement replace idea. So this is where it works really well. You have teachers who are using TAs as a resource in their classroom to free time up for them to go and work with the children who are struggling most, rather than the sort of widespread and common default setting of making sure it's the TAs who are working with the lower attainers or the kids with SEN. So in that sense, there's a real boon for teachers in terms of having somebody in the classroom who can do things like provide a sort of teaching triage, where they are able to identify the children who seem to be struggling the most at any one point and direct the teacher to be with that child or with those children next in the during the teach. The other area of Well, I think this is potentially one of the most the area where we could get some really transformational change is connected to the third recommendation, which is about how TAs can help develop pupils' independent learning skills and to manage their own learning. So we know from the evidence that there is a tendency, with the very best of intentions, for TAs to correct work for children and complete work for children, and that has a consequence of fostering a dependency, at its very worst. And we've done some quite extensive work on what we might need to do to turn that around. So when TAs are working with pupils, they're concentrating on scaffolding their learning appropriately to make sure that the children are always in charge of the learning and responsible for the outputs, and so on. And that's a kind of fundamental shift in terms of what we've seen happen historically. And it will require a change in thinking and culture in schools, but it also is something that I think schools can do. It's not the kind of thing that costs a lot of money, just addressing how we interact with children.
And it really raises the expectation, I guess, of making very explicit to TAs exactly what their role and function is and how they do that, rather than sort of assume that they know how to nurture independence, I guess. So, Rob, that leads us...
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, please carry on. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a whole school.
Yeah.
We want to rethink their role, but also a conversation with teachers about how they can use TAs better. And one layer up, it's about really strong leadership and having a focus and a vision for what it is you want your TAs to do in your school.
Yeah, and that leads us on to kind of that next question I've got for you. You've been working here with us at iObserve to develop an observation tool for TAs, which thank you for all that work. We're really delighted with the product. But that tool focuses schools on practice, preparedness, and deployment, three aspects of the work that you've been doing. Can you tell us why those things are so important, and why they are sort of the particular foci of school leaders' monitoring procedures, why they would be worth a school focusing on?
Okay, so those three themes emerged strongly in our analysis of the data from the DIS project. So we came up with something of a conceptual model for thinking about what explained what we found, but also what might frame our thinking and action in the future. And in a sense, the things I talked about in the previous question are to do with deployment and practice. So our practice is really our sort of byword for what's happening in the interactions and how we improve the nature and quality of the interactions that TAs have with students. From the deployment point of view, that's around, for teachers, that's around the classroom management, driven by this idea of supplementing, not replacing. And then at the school leadership level, this is really a broader question about, as I said a moment ago, what it is we want the role and the contribution of TAs to be in our school, how we might distribute our TAs across our year groups or our subjects, and making some fairly fundamental decisions about where we put people and how we use them in classrooms, and maybe coming up with some framework for how they should be used and how they shouldn't be used. Those are riding high in the four recommendations that are on that slide in red. The first two are really underpinned by, or they're talking to deployment. The third one is about practice interactions, and the fourth one is all around preparation. This is the one that school leaders tend to zero in on immediately, because it's talking to training needs, the need for teachers and TAs to have some communication and liaison time, and all of that is really important. If we're going to make sure we do get good value for the money we spend on TAs, it's an absolutely essential part to make sure that they are fully prepared for their role in classrooms. But it doesn't, it is not choose one of those recommendations and and go for it. It's very much the interaction between all four of them.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Rob, for that. You launched the Education Endowment Fund, in partnership with the work that you've been doing, launched a TA toolkit about 3 weeks ago on their website. You've been instrumental in designing that. Can you tell us just briefly a little bit about how schools could use that material?
Yes, we're very pleased with that work. It's come out really well. It's worth saying that a fair bit of it was developed with schools. So there is sometimes researchers are accused of just sort of pronouncing from their ivory towers about how things should be, without getting in the classroom. But we worked very closely with some school leaders and Senko to develop some of these ideas. So it's very much a conversation with the profession. So I suppose the starting point is the guidance report, which sets out these 7 recommendations and goes into each one of them in a lot more depth. So that's all of these things are available to download for free. They're on the EEF website, but they're also mirrored on our website, which is maximisingtas.co.uk. And the resources that sit alongside it are helpful for schools in terms of reviewing their practice or where they are. So we have some tools for a self-assessment, a self-evaluation, where you can kind of red, amber, green tool, which you can rate your practice against the recommendations. There are some guidance on starting points for schools on how you might begin to implement the evidence. There is a few handouts that can actually help the implementation. So things around we have the scaffolding framework that underpins the interactions work that we've developed up. There's a handout on that. So most of these things are useful. 1-page documents, action plan templates, policy templates, and they're designed really to help schools. When I talk to schools about them, I say that I would rather give you something that you can choose not to use than just say, write a policy and get on with it. So they are there really for schools to pull apart and use as they want to. But we've just tried to bring the best of what we've learned and what the research is telling us as a starting point.
Fantastic. And so in a second, I'm going to show colleagues the iObserve app that you've helped us work on and develop. Before we do that, just if colleagues listening want to contact you or want to find out more about your work or what you can offer in terms of supporting them and their schools, just tell us the best way to kind of reach you and what you might be able to offer them, if that's possible, Rob.
Sure. Well, most of what we've got resources wise, and we've done an awful lot of work that is freely available, and you can find that on our website under the resources tab. So all the EF stuff is there, and there's some bits and pieces as well from the books that we've done, and you can see the books that we've written as well, and find some information about that. There's stuff going up all the time as well, so hopefully in the next few weeks there'll be some more resources added from some other work that we've been looking at. We run courses, we offer CPD. You can find out about that on the website under courses, and we operate we take the course to wherever there is a demand, so you can colleagues wherever they are can find out about that and get in touch. We are also running a we've got some funding from the EEF to run a trial of all the work that we do, so we can actually formally test it for impact. And there's information about that on the website. So if schools are interested and eligible in the areas that we're running it, they might want to, they're very welcome to get in touch with that through our email address, ioe.meet@ucl.ac.uk. Anything related to anything we're doing, the projects, the training, the resources, you can reach us through that. My Twitter handle's underneath, and it somehow the little Twitter bird has covered up the S at the end of of maximising.
That's my fault. Yeah.
But yeah, it's maximising. There's an S underneath that little bird. But you can find me lurking around in the Twitter sphere as well.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully, Rob, that you might come back in a few months' time next year and tell us a little bit about the progress you've made with that Education Endowment Fund research. So can I say a huge thank you for joining me this morning, talking to us about the work and all of the resources that are available to schools. So thanks very much, Rob. And I'm just going to spend just 2 more minutes showing colleagues how iObserve might be able to support your work around TAs. So iObserve is a lesson observation tool. It's free to download from iTunes, available for iPads, and it's designed to support lesson observation in classrooms, but we have built, as I've said, with Rob, a specific section on TAs. So if I just give you a little tour of what's available for the TAs section. So from the main screen, when you download, you'll find various options from iObserve Walks to here we've got iObserve TAs as an example. There are a variety of functions, but I would recommend that you simply try it in test mode first, but you can focus in on any one of those things, deployment, practice, preparedness, or all three at the same time. When you're in test mode, this allows you just to play and try, and so when you download for free, you can have access to all of this. And it's quite simple. Rob's worked with us to create a set of 6 descriptors of increasingly effective practice around those 3 areas that we've been talking about. What you've also got the facility to do is seek guidance, get guidance on how you might make a judgment, how you might make an evaluation. So what you might talk to the teachers about, what you might look to in the classroom for, what you might talk to children about, and so on. And you simply rest the slider dot at the point that you think best reflects typicality in either the lesson or as a result of conversations with leaders and teachers before or after the lesson. You've got the option to add your own free text, so you can identify strengths, the things that the teacher and TA, importantly, not just one, would have to work on. You can summarise the key points here in strengths and areas for improvement, and if you're a member, you can then collate some of that evidence to produce reports that analyse the efficacy of practice, preparedness and deployment. There's a timestamp facility, so you can track when the TA is still not doing anything, or when the teacher is still talking, or when the TA is having a fantastic bit of interaction with the class. And you've also got the option to take photographs to build up your evidence base of good practice. When you've finished, you save it, and you can view a PDF here, or you can email yourself a copy of the PDF. And what teachers and TAs tell us they really like about that is that visual representation of this is where it's going really well, this is what I might want to work on and develop. So that's just one aspect of the iObserve tool. If you want to know more about the lesson observation section, which has got material for observing in early years and Key Stage 2, 3 and 4, and we're just currently working on a Key Stage 5 version, then there is other video material on our website where you can have a look at what else it offers, or you can organise a webinar like this for a demonstration in school. So I'd like to just end by saying a huge thank you again to Rob. If you'd like to learn more about iObserve, again, some ways of contacting us are as follows. You can visit our webpage where you'll find more detail, more video footage and so forth. You can follow us on Twitter. Now, please note that's a double underscore between I and observe, so at iObserve. And then you can email us teachingassistants@iobserve.co.uk if you want to find out more about the specific tool. So, Rob, thank you very much for working with us this morning. I've really appreciated your input, and I hope that our listeners have found that useful. So have a good day, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.